everyone, and welcome back to the Hilltop. We are back after our summer hiatus. We are starting classes at Chaminade here in just about 10 days, and so we're back with the Hilltop for the 25-26 school year. We are happy to kick off our next season of episodes with Peter Yewell, class of 1984 alum from Chaminade, who's had quite a career. I'm interested to learn more about in our podcast in the technology sector, in marketing, advertising, digital avenues, and was also the 2025 graduation speaker at Chaminade a few months ago in May. So we are happy to have Pete join us here tonight for our podcast. Thanks, Pete, for joining us.
Thank you.
You
Absolutely.
you are in the San Francisco area, is that right?
Yeah, the San Francisco Bay Area. We live and work out of the East Bay area. So, like beyond East Bay, sometimes people think of Oakland. This is a little bit further east. The Danville area is where we are. In fact, our office right now, where I'm sitting, is in Danville.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I always like to start out at least briefly with kind of the early days of our guests and kind of work chronologically through their lives, and obviously spend a little more time on the Chaminade portion of your life, and also for you, kind of your business career and the interesting stories you have from that. So, what was young Pete like? What were you into as a young boy? What was your family life? Were you in St. Louis and all your life up until through your time at Chaminade?
Well, no, I moved around a little bit, but I did grow up in St. Louis. I still call it, home. I'm still a Cardinal fan. I think fondly of the Lou and my friends and family that are still there, and I do visit pretty regularly. But um, I'll start with how kind of got to Chaminade. But I was a restless kid, like probably normal boys. I got into a lot of trouble. Actually, it wasn't necessarily my idea that I wanted to go to Chaminade. It was my parents. I'm the youngest of five, and the youngest by a wide margin between me and the next youngest. And anyway, all of the siblings, older brothers, sisters, went to Ladue High School. And when I came along, they were like, my parents were like, "Yeah, you're not gonna go to Ladue." And so that's kind of how I ended up at Chaminade.
And
And
when did you come? Was it in high school or one of the middle school ages?
that was middle school. I started in, I believe, seventh grade. So seventh and eighth in middle school, and then the high school. Yeah.
Wonderful. I happen to be the youngest by a wide margin too. I'm 10 years younger than my closest sibling, so I know from whence you come.
There you go. Right on. That's pretty much the same as me, and my next older is 10 years.
So what were
Uh,
your first impressions of Chaminade when you got there and maybe a change from where you'd been?
well, I had always gone to colloquial schools like Catholic schools, and so they were much smaller. So this was a pretty big change at that time. But I will say that I definitely friended a few people early on that kind of helped who socialize and get to know. And I also got into sports pretty quickly, or other interests, but sports was a primary driver, sports and music. And and fortunately they engaged in that. Like I was playing football in middle school, and that was awesome. Like I so I didn't necessarily choose or want to go there initially, but I quickly adapted, and looking back on it, it was clearly a good choice. Yeah.
Wonderful. So you mentioned sports. What were you mentioned football specifically, but what were some of the other sports or activities you got involved in at Chaminade?
Well, I played baseball, football, and ran track. Those were my primary sports. And football and track were the two. I'm a lifelong baseball fanatic and would have wanted to be, probably would have been my first choice. Um, but um, but anyway, I mean, I was pretty fast for a Catholic kid, and so I did well in speed oriented things, and football. was just a love. So, and I played almost every position in football. And that led to running track, and I ended up being much better at track than anything else. So I stuck with it.
Wonderful. Was Don Ohms the coach when you were there? Was that still his era?
He was around. He wasn't the head coach. McKee was the head coach by that point, but maybe he had just moved into like an advisory role, but he was definitely still there. And there was a Mike McKee, I think was his name, and then an O'Brien, who might have been like a relative of McKee's, but anyway, was also a coach there during that period of time.
And how was the football program? What position did you play in football?
Um, I played well in the middle school. I was the blocking back in the single wing. Uh,
Gotcha.
I mean, they were still running the single wing back
Yes,
then.
legendary for that for sure.
Right on. And so basically I was a blocking back and a linebacker, and then in upper school got into stayed linebacker, a little bit of a lineman, which I'd never understood, but I was fast so I could move around people. And so anyway, but yeah, that was it.
Good deal. And outside of the sports world, what were you involved in any other clubs, activities, that kind of stuff?
Well,
Chaminade?
I've always been a lifelong music freak, and so I I wasn't necessarily in the band, but I would hang out in the music studio all the time. And we had a little group of us that played all the musicians that you had there, all the instruments that you had there, and we had our own little uh, classmate band that we would weekly or whatever, the music director there, I forget his name, but he basically let us hang out there a lot. And
Was
so
it Schmiehausen when you were
yeah,
here?
that
Yeah,
was him. Yeah.
yeah, gotcha. I never crossed paths with him directly. He was gone by the time I got here to Chaminade, but certainly he's a legendary name around these parts for sure.
Yeah, he was cool. He was supportive of us, and others. A lot of people like there was a couple of like bands, I guess you would say, that would play events and stuff. And so anyway, yeah, that was a lot of fun, and that was mostly a hobby. Although I definitely did more with that later on too.
Great. Yeah, we'll talk about that. You had started your career sort of in the music world, I know, so that'll come up in a bit. What were there any kind of faculty members, staff members, kind of legendary folks that stood out to you or helped shape you during that time that you were at Chaminade?
There was a oh man, well, a couple names I remember. I remember the science teacher, Bander, I want to say was his
Oh,
name.
right. Yep.
That was also middle school, but I was kind of a math guy. So physics and science were kind of, I would lean towards that. And my math teacher was a Fiala. I believe his name was
Yes.
Rob
Yep.
too, Rob
Right.
Fiala.
Yep.
And I mean, I just liked him because I liked his class. And so mostly that kind of thing. There were a few of the brothers that were still there that were um, like mentory kind of in a way. I was growing up in a challenging family situation. My dad was going through some health issues, and while I didn't really broadcast that to anyone, there were a few people that knew, and they just sort of checked in every once in a while to see how I was doing, which I appreciated. I was still sort of quiet about it, but anyway, they managed that well, I would say.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So after Chaminade, you moved on to Mizzou. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. And you majored, I believe, in electrical engineering overall. Is that right?
I was in, yeah, it was engineering. It was electrical engineering, computer engineering, and math. But
Why was that of interest to you, or why was that a career
well,
path
I was
potentially?
I was always kind of a techie guy. I mean, a little bit, nerdy is maybe not exactly the right fit, although it's a compliment today, whereas back then it wasn't necessarily. But I always lean towards technology. Um, when I first was looking at schools, and I didn't apply to a bunch of schools like people do today, but I either wanted to go to Mizzou and pursue engineering, or I wanted to apply to a music school. And I basically got into both. And my parents kind of persuaded me to try, engineering first. And that was definitely, and they kind of won that battle also. But I loved Mizzou. I have to say, like, of all of the things I've done in my young and up until, basically graduating and going off on life, I loved Mizzou. That was great.
Wonderful.
And it was tied to Chaminade just because, I mean, the fraternity we were in, the class of guys, I mean, there was about a dozen of us that all ended up going to Mizzou, and that group of people still hangs out to this day. So, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. And you've mentioned a few times already kind of your interest in music and being involved in it, maybe not directly in terms of being in band at Chaminade. Just wanted to dive in a second. Where did that love of music come from? Was it just sort of natural? Was that a big thing in your family? Were your parents into that? Where did that kind of come from in your life?
I mean, yeah, they were all into various stuff. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was probably 5, and that was mostly me. Although my brother played too, so I probably saw his guitars and I'm like, hey, what's that? Let me play them. And he probably said, stay away from my guitars, which meant, I was, of course, gonna figure out how to do that. And anyway, but yeah, I mean, I played all through. I still do, but like it's a hobby. It's not a thing. But
Sure.
for a while, I was pretty serious about it.
Sure. Well, yeah, it after college, I know you sort of got serious with it to a degree. I remember an interesting story you told at graduation about your transition into the blues environment and this St. Louis Blues Society, and how did that come about? Can you take us through that kind of an interesting the change from engineering to running a blues music organization?
Well, so my first job out of school was working for what is now Accenture, big consulting firm, and 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 what my degrees were and the kinds of internships and stuff that I had done lent itself well to that getting that job. And to, at the time that was sort of a blue chip job to get. But once I got into it, I realized that I hated it. And it's so funny today because now I have all these friends that went through the same thing, like they also, that was a pretty big landing spot for talented young guys coming out of school and girls. And to a lot of us, it was just didn't turn out to be the pristine, great thing that we thought it was going to be. Anyway, so I didn't last too long at that. And I was living in New York on that job. I was based in St. Louis, but sent to New York on a project there. So I come back to St. Louis, and I'm kind of like, now what? And some friends took me to a show artist that was playing in Soulard, which is kind of the St. Louis bluesy area of town. And I ended up meeting all these people that were in this fledgling nonprofit organization that promoted music, and they were all talking about wanting to put on a festival. And so even at that age, I might have been 25 at the time, I had gone to like the Chicago Blues Festival multiple times, many times. And I always wondered why we didn't have that in St. Louis. And so when they said that, I was like, immediately, I'm in. Like, I don't know what's involved, but I'd love to see that happen. So I'm in. And, over the course of, whatever they interviewed and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up becoming my title was the executive director of the St. Louis Blues Society. It was the nonprofit organization, and through that organization, we created the St. Louis Blues Festival, and I was whatever the executive producer of that. All at the age of 25, 26, 27, when I didn't have a clue what that meant. But one of the things about being youthful is you have a lot of energy and you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes that's a hurdle, but other times it's actually beneficial because you don't know what roadblocks are out there and you just go for it. And that's what we did. We just went for it. And I recruited as many people as I could to get in and help. And it worked. And so we got it off the ground. And the first year of the festival was 92. It was downtown, on the steps of the old Kiel Opera House.
Mhm.
And that was where the stage was. And there's a park right there. And they basically cordoned off all those streets, and that was where the festival was. And that was with the full support of the mayor's office of the city of St. Louis. We had Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola, what was then American Airlines. We had just bought TWA, and they were still based there. Or Southwestern Bell with AT&T was still based there. Um, all sponsored it. Like, it was quite, it turned out quite well. We got probably really lucky, but also, definitely struck a chord. And in the course of pulling that off, a lot of uh, media watching this. We had KMOX sponsoring it, Channel 4, KMOV, KSHE, etc., St. Louis Post-Dispatch. The state of Missouri has a whatever Department of History, and they wrote a grant for our benefit. So we had a lot of attention. And because I was the little spokesperson guy, and I say little meaning young, running around trying to coordinate everything, I got a lot of attention for that. And so, after a year or 2 years, I think we did it for 2 years, or I did it for 2 years. I kind of had to go find whatever's going to happen next. And so a lot of people reached out knowing that I was going to have to go do something next. And that's kind of how I landed in media. I had no desire, interest, or knowledge really there either of, working in broadcast or any other form of digital media. And so that was sort of the entree. And so I ended up working at KSHE for a number of years, not too long, maybe 3 years, but like seeing the other side of media and how it works. And then,
Before we get too deep into
yeah,
the media side of things, I just want to jump back a little bit to you mentioned, hey, roadblocks you didn't know, things like that. You just listed a litany of sponsors you had for this event that you put together as a 25, 26-year-old, et cetera. Not too deep into the minutia, but how did you break through into these big, national, international corporations that, yeah, they're based in St. Louis now or at the time were, but how are you able to sort of break down some doors, I bet, or knock on some doors and be diligent about getting through that doorway?
so we had a decent board of directors that had connections. And really, like if they knew someone, they would introduce somebody. And so we would start with like, we needed the mayor to endorse this, to say that this is okay. We needed a few other names to say that they were willing to um, be on an advisory board. And so we created an advisory board, and we got the governor of the state of Missouri to join. At the time, it was Vince Shamel was the mayor of St.
Hmm.
Louis, and he had an office of special events. So he agreed to be on our advisory board, and he assigned that office to help us. Um, and so a few things like that really kind of validated it as a thing we want to have happen. And then we took that to sponsors. And what I learned very quickly was you need to start with the brewery. If you get the brewery on, everybody else
Right.
will.
They still
And
run the town.
yep. And so, I mean, August Bush, the fourth, was basically my age. And I had run into him occasionally because we had some, shared circle of friends. And so but we also through other events knew their event marketing department. So anyway, with the advice and help of a lot of other people that knew how to write proposals and things like that, we got in front of them. We were able to show the all of the advisory members that were important. There's no shortage at the time, I'm sure it is still today, there's no shortage of well-known musicians that live and work in the area. And,
Hmm.
at that time, Chuck Berry was still around.
Hmm.
He was involved in this organization. The piano player Johnny Johnson also, Oliver Sane also, Henry Townsend, all of these names, maybe, not everybody today know who they are, but they were important names in the city of St. Louis back then. And so they were all involved in this organization. So we just leveraged that and it was a domino effect. And I will say, looking back on it, having now done this several times in other
Right.
other organizations, what we managed to accomplish there in relatively short order is was a little surprising.
Yeah, certainly impressive. Yeah, and this was kind of your first experience, I would imagine, as a with a startup organization, an entrepreneur kind of experience, right? Which is going to define the rest of your career, I know,
Pretty
in doing
much, yeah.
this.
That's
Yeah.
that's accurate.
Exactly.
I
So yeah, you moved on to working in the media at KC and then broadcast.com, right? And that's kind of how you got on the sort of internet side of things,
yeah.
that excuse me, technology, right?
Yes. I uh I happen to be at a internet radio. So, I mean, like this is so different, but back in 99, the internet is just taking off. 98, 99, it's so different today. But radio stations and broadcast media in general was extremely scared of the internet. They, like, what's this going to do to our business? And all this. And so, I just the mindset of let's embrace it and figure out what it is. Um, Tried to push our organization, and I'm like not in any kind of leadership role in radio at this time, but I was recognized for being, a techie and having had done this, festival thing. So like, I got a little bit of a voice, and I said, hey, we should, do something around the internet. And I came up with an idea, and they sent me to this conference to pitch the idea to the head of the radio company. And at that conference happened to be Mark Cuban, the co-founder of broadcast.com. And I met him there. And the radio company didn't necessarily want to pursue the idea that I had proposed, but I showed it to Mark Cuban later that day, and he thought it was awesome. I mean, broadcast.com originally started, think of YouTube before YouTube, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it basically introduced streaming media. What we're using right now to do this podcast was created by broadcast.com in like the mid 90s.
Hmm.
Started as audio and then postage stamp size video, right? And
Right.
then eventually as the
I
internet
remember
got
those days,
better.
right?
Yep. So anyway, what they did is a part of developing their business at broadcast was stream radio stations like Keishi. So when I showed him what I was doing, he immediately got it, what I was proposing anyway. And so basically he introduced me to other people that became a daisy chain, and I ended up going to work for broadcast.com. And they let me set up an office in St. Louis and basically be a regional rep for their business. But broadcast was being acquired by Yahoo at that same period of time, or it just had been acquired during the period between first meeting him and when this happened. So I basically went to work for Yahoo, but in this broadcast business unit,
Hmm.
and that's how that got started. And
Gotcha.
then that kind of spread quite a bit after that.
Right. So yeah, working with Mark Cuban right off the bat, you're gonna have some other interactions that I'm sure will come up here with some other international, famous folks famous in the tech world. So yeah, that moved you on to the technology side of things, which it sounds like from your background was you were kind of into the tech world from the beginning and back to your
Mhm.
engineering interest and that sort of thing. So. I know one of your first big jumps, and certainly a topic I want to talk a little bit about, is into Facebook. You were, I think I remember Dr. Guidry not introducing you as one of the first 100 employees or some number like that of Facebook. So you were certainly in on the ground floor in many ways. In that, what was that experience like? How'd that come about? And just talk us through what that experience was like at I would imagine, a very exciting and new time.
And crazy time. So, so So I'm living in St. Louis. I'm working for, I had now transitioned from a one business unit broadcast to another one. And I was a team man. I was managing a team, and I had people in Chicago, Texas, and California, San Francisco and LA. And I didn't live in any one of those places. And the bosses basically called me up and said, "Hey, if you want this job, you need to live somewhere that." And they gave me three options. And San Francisco was an easy choice. My wife's originally from the area. And uh, so we kind of knew this was coming. And so we had already talked about it. But when I did actually get the phone call, then it was, it took 5 minutes to say, we'll go to San Francisco. So they basically moved us out, and we had two little kids, 2 years old and 4 year, or maybe 1 and 3 at that time. So moving a young family is definitely not for the faint of heart. And then we moved in the same town. This is where we moved to, and my original job was going to be in San Francisco, which is maybe 30 minutes away. And so, a nice suburb, easy for growing up a family and stuff, but also I can go do my thing. And which I did for about a year, 15 months. And then um, a lot of the people that I got to know at Yahoo, some of whom had also moved from the other places to come out. One was in Dallas, where broadcast was based. I didn't know him super well, but we had a lot of mutual friends. He was When he moved to San Francisco, he became the head of sales for Yahoo, and we talked a lot, just water coolish stuff. And anyway, he left Yahoo to and announced that he was going to Facebook, and I happened to be having coffee with him like the day after that. And he literally said, "So, what do you think about Facebook?" And Facebook at the time was only in like maybe 100 universities. It was the only college at the time. And you had to have a college issued email address to even create an account. It started at Harvard, obviously, and along the East Coast, but it also is kind of like the microwave effect. It went to the West Coast pretty quickly. Stanford might have been one of the first 10 schools. And so you had this coastal thing going. People out here knew about it. People on New York and East Coast knew about it. No one in the middle knew about it. And when I said that I was leaving Yahoo to go do this startup, everybody was like, "What? What kind of an idiot are you?" And so
Because Yahoo, even at that time, was a
Oh, they
giant,
were
right? I mean, that
king of the
was
internet.
established, right?
It's a bit sad, actually. I'm still a little bit bleed purple. Was such a great brand and such a great company. But at that time, even then, I knew that, kinks in the armor, Google was going to take them out. They were making bad decisions. And so I was ready to go. As soon as that came together, in fact, I was interviewing with other companies. I was going to leave regardless. It just became very obvious to me this wasn't going to go well for them. So anyway, that was that. And so the first, well, the whole time there was it's like being, on a rocket, and constantly changing, what you're going to do at all times. And you have to be okay with that. Like, there is a mindset that you have to have if you're going to work in that type of an environment. And, like, just like, I mean, it's very different, but experiences like the festival and like how I met Mark Cuban originally lent itself to going through what I did there. Like, I'm not saying it's exactly the same at all. It just sort of, you got to be able to roll with it and make decisions without all the information.
For sure. So, yeah, an all-consuming environment, I imagine too. How is that, especially in those days with balancing family life? I mean, we've seen it portrayed in movies and stuff, Silicon Valley and people, literally living at the office and spending all day. How do you balance, especially at that time in your life, a young family and trying to grow your career in a demanding environment?
I mean, it is 100% everything you just said and then some. One of the things I did turned out to be, luck, stroke of genius, but not that I knew it at the time. So going to from where we live in Danville, to where they were in downtown Palo Alto. I mean, it's literally downtown Palo Alto. There's Stanford University, and literally right across the street is downtown Palo Alto. And at the epicenter of that is where we had our first office. And that's where I would go to work every day. And that commute without any traffic is an hour. With traffic, it's, whatever it becomes. And so when we and my wife Catherine was definitely involved in the whole process of interviewing there. She knew Mike. Mike is the guy who made the he said, "Hey, come with us." She knew Mike, and so when this all came up, she trusted his. And then she started checking things out. She's like, "Dude, you got to do that." And so one of the things we did on a Saturday is drive from home to downtown Palo Alto, walk around the town, and go have lunch at one of the places right around the corner from the office. And part of the point to her was this is what it's going to be like every day if we do this. And we got to be sort of like a team.
Mhm.
So from then on, even the little kids, even though because they would come with me sometimes, they would be like kid days, and I'd bring them. So my youngest daughter actually got to interview Mark Zuckerberg for a paper she was writing in like
Oh, fun.
grade, and so anyway, but like that was it was important to have them involved in it in order to make sense of this crazy life we were going to be living. I mean, we'd only lived in California for a year and a half, not even. And then, we go make this change. And so, yeah, there was a right way to do it for sure.
Very good. So into this time at Facebook, can you give us behind the scenes a little bit? What was Mark Zuckerberg like? What is he like? And did you know, kind of have a feeling at that early days of Facebook that it was gonna grow into and sort of take over the world in many ways like it has?
Uh, Well, so first off, I would say everyone in the area here kind of had heard about it and it had the potential, right? So there was that. And I think that's the way you have to describe it. Like no one, of course, is going to know. And there had been rocket ships to explode. And there was a company before Facebook that was very similar, it was a social network, and it did explode.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that Facebook did right is bring a couple people from that company just to kind of remind everybody, like, be be careful, do the right thing. So anyway, uh, but we all knew that if we did the right thing, if we all did our job, it's like, any team sport, you do your thing, stay in your lane. Everybody else does that. You trust the other, you take care of your team, and um, but I would say that we all knew that it could be a big success. Scale and all of that, you never know. But
Sure.
along the way, a lot of other bigger companies wanted to acquire Facebook, which, had that happened, it would be a different story. It's certainly good, just not as good. You just don't see around the corner in terms of that kind of stuff. But in terms of the company itself and what we were doing and the quality of the people that were there, this was some of the most intelligent people in the world at that time, especially in technology, that were creating things that we take for granted today that didn't exist in any form prior to that.
Hmm.
And the that part is something that is hard to explain without going through like little details. Like you open any website today and you're going to see a feed of news that shows you every single website on the planet does that today.
Hmm.
That concept was invented by Facebook. And so like things like that just are, he literally the company did change the internet, very much so. It's just not in ways that you think about. You think about social and, a bunch of social networks and all of that. That's not really what this company changed. It's the way the internet operates and interacts and the connections between systems, API technology, things like the iPhone App Store
Hmm.
started at Facebook. They'll never get the
Interesting.
credit for it, but that was invented at Facebook.
Wow.
And so, the talent level of the engineers putting all this stuff together was phenomenal. And so one of the things like the I went to an interview one day and before I started, it was kind of the final step. And I met with every department leader except for Zuckerberg. And by the way, Zuck is 19 years old at this time.
Wow.
Um, the head of biz dev, who had just become the COO, was previously worldwide head of Amazon business development. The head of technology was previously in the same role at Oracle. The head of business development was previously at McKinsey. The head of sales, my guy was head of sales at Yahoo. Every single person was a walk-off home run, previous success story,
Mhm.
didn't need to work, running their department and reporting to a 19-year-old kid.
Wow.
And when I came home from that day, I just said I said, Catherine, I don't know what I just saw, but we have to do this. Like, this is ridiculous. And so being in that environment was an absolute treat. Like, walk off the best experience I've ever had in a career. I don't think that that kind of thing can be repeated. And, it's just like, it was just crazy. Every single celebrity, politician, or well-known technology company wanted to come and hang out at Facebook during those days. Just be in the room, like
Around,
walk
yeah.
around and touch the people, talk. Like, I have no, like, who was I don't know, I can't remember all the names, but there was a famous actor who came in. He had just done a bunch of movies and he came in for lunch one day, and every single woman in the entire company ran over to, it was just like, but like, that's kind of what happened like all the time. And, Obama was there. YouTube played one Friday afternoon. I mean, it was
Wow.
just crazy stuff. But part of it, the reason for all of that was just this crazy collection of talent that existed there. And so, to be considered part of that is maybe one of the best professional compliments that you can get,
Yeah, certainly a professional high there in that regard,
Yeah.
and pushing you forward. So, what takes you away from that? Why do you move away from that? What's sort of the next steps?
Well, I mean, I was there for almost 7 years, which I know doesn't sound like very long. People at Chaminade have worked for 27 years or
Right.
longer. But, and it's going to sound crazy to say this, and maybe nobody really gets it, but a day is like a week is like a month is like a year. I mean, it just, I was exhausted. Like, we had gone from, maybe 90 people when I walked in the door to several thousand in 6 years. We had gone from 10 million in revenue to north of 1 billion revenue in 6 years. Um, and we had maybe 10 million total users to a significant percentage of the entire globe,
Wow.
in a very concentrated period of time. And you can't, I would never complain about that. No one would ever give me any credence for complaints. Not like there's a reason to complain, but you're just like exhausted after a period like that. So, I mean, when I walked in the door, we didn't have a single HR employee. My wife was pregnant with our third kid. The only person that resembled HR was a recruiter working to hire more engineers. So, we managed ourselves like we all did. Like the notion of autonomy to manage whatever you got to do was on steroids at this place at that time. So, to be a part of that is awesome, but you do need a break. And so I just after, at the right around the 2013 or so, I needed to take a little bit of a break. And interestingly, about a year later, they introduced sabbaticals for
Oh, really?
employees to
Yeah.
do exactly that. But I was on the front end of
As the
everyone.
company grew, right, as
Yeah.
the business culture of the
Uh,
organization. for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I stayed involved. I was there were some things that I was still connected to for a couple of years. And but but you know, it was great to just sort of take a little time, catch my breath. Okay, now what? You know, that was I think it was just the right thing for me at that
Good.
time.
And then what was next? You moved out a little more on your own, right?
Yeah, so I took a little time, and ever since then I've been an entrepreneur. This is what we're doing right now. Outpatient app is the second company that I had. First one was a learning experience. This one is doing well.
So let's talk a little bit about outpatients and kind of I listened to a speech I guess you did that was on YouTube here in I think it was in St. Louis a number of years ago, kind of laid out trying to pull together different resources from the healthcare industry, right, and make them palatable to folks.
Yeah, so we started out as to simplify it down, a care coordination platform to help patients, family members, and the medical community to kind of all collaborate together. Where, you know, my background as a techie guy and, you know, product oriented person at Facebook, we would call this a productivity tool, meaning things that, you know, help people to collaborate and work more efficiently. And we were essentially building a productivity tool aimed at the healthcare market. And we started with a free version of the product for consumers to use, which we did because we wanted people to bang on it and then tell us what was wrong and what was right. And we launched the app, got thousands of people to use it, and we built a little system in the app where you could shake the phone and it would automatically pop up a little entry box for you to type in anything you wanted,
Huh.
like whatever, put it in and tell us, you know, and so for about a year, we used that to evolve the product. And what was interesting is that we ended up taking out more things than we put in. People love it simple. And I knew that, and you heard that when keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
no truer words ever said. And you know, you're not talking about a lot of real estate on a phone or any device, even a screen. And so you got to be careful not to overload it. And so anyway, that was how we developed it initially. Then we started working with commercial health systems. COVID actually happened. So we were doing this in 2018, 2019, right before COVID. And we had built up a bunch of contracts with commercial health systems, specialized things like children's hospitals in St. Louis and out here, other type of specialized health systems, all with this productivity notion, you know, built into it. And we had a bunch of contracts signed. We were all ready to launch in like the first quarter of 2020. And in like October, I get a call from a friend of a friend who says, "Hey, I want to introduce you to this organization in the military that is bringing innovation type stuff into the military." And I'm like, what does the military have anything to do with what we're doing? Like, you know, I'm sorry. I mean, thank you for the, you know, reaching out, but I don't get it. And so he further says, well, you're doing health, right? And it's sort of like logistics and coordination and efficiency. That's what they need help with. And you might find that you have a receptive ear. And we thought very seriously about saying no, because one of the things that you cannot do in a startup is too many things. You got to focus. You can't boil the ocean, is the phrase that people use.
Right. It's a good one.
You pick one or two things and you just nail that, and then you expand from there. Well, so I told my co-founder Brian. He and I both came from Facebook, and we started this company and together. And I said, Brian, I can't say no to the Air Force. We got to do this, but we'll do it this way. I'll spend a chunk of my time, nobody else on the team will, and we'll just start it that way and we'll see what happens. And so in December, we won this little contract with the Air Force through an innovation ecosystem that is kind of like an accelerator program. That's a phrase people out here use a lot. It's not exactly the same, but it's close. So it existed to try to bring any kind of innovation into the Air Force across any component. So like the other companies that were in this thing when we were doing it were like lasers and drones and planes and guns and other stuff. And then we got this little health software company over here in the corner
Right.
trying to make things more efficient, right? And so we won this tiny little contract, which basically gave us free use to go and knock on doors as a validated vendor to the US government. And in the course of knocking on doors, discovered that our system, as it was currently working for commercial health systems, seemed to line up fairly well with something that the military needs, which is tracking what's called medical readiness. So what's that mean? You and I, regular Joes, know that we should probably see a doctor every year. We should probably get certain labs done. We maybe should get a vaccine or not. It's a free country. You can do it or not. If you're in any form of service member, military reserves, Coast Guard, the National Guard, Air National Guard, Border Patrol, TSA working at you name it, any form, you are required to be medically cleared for duty at all times. It is a compliance requirement. And so what we were effectively realizing through this process is that our system was very close to adapting to tracking medical compliance for job related needs. And um, so we modeled the prototype, this concept of a slightly adapted version of our product to be essentially an IMR tracking system. IMR stands for individual medical readiness, but it's basically what I just said. And so on March 17, we are on a Zoom call presenting the concept for an IMR tracking system to the Air Force on the day, turns out to be 7 days before lockdown.
Right.
And so about 2 months later, the entire health system is shut down. Everything that we thought we were going to launch, not going to launch it. And we have no recourse. There's a global pandemic going on. It's not like we can legally sue somebody for not honoring a contract. That wouldn't go so well.
Sure.
So, like, everything was shut down. And so, within a couple months, we were notified that we won a pretty large contract to build out this system. And so, in 2020 and 21, we started building out this, what is in that banner. And basically it's an ability for service members to use their phone to request and track their own medical readiness. And so we have since then won multiple additional contracts and now are being adopted enterprise-wide slowly. That's not something that happens overnight, but all related to tracking and maintaining compliance against regulated requirements. And so it starts with readiness and expands from there to other things. I'm sure you've heard of OSHA.
Of course.
Well, that is basically a list of rules. Depending on the type of job,
Right.
you have to follow these certain things in order to be approved to do your job, right? You can imagine if you're a pilot, they're not, and you have mental health challenges, they're not going to let you fly a plane, right?
Right.
So all of this, every job and every region of the world where you're going to do that job has a checklist. And so what we effectively did is digitize that checklist and automate the workflow to tell you, Rob, it's time for you to do these three things in order to maintain your medical compliance.
Interesting.
And we started with the military and are, essentially expanding that there. But this goes into, every form of regulated industry. Like even within the government, there's the VA, which is
Right.
separate from DoD, related, obviously. The FAA pilots and air traffic controllers
Hmm.
also have same kind of requirements. So anyway, that's kind of how that evolved.
So
And
for you, interesting to me, for you, this contact or the friend of a friend kind of a thing, and this contact that you thought you were maybe going to ignore turned out to be the biggest breakthrough, right? For outpatient.
it started that way. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the first step, and then you
Right.
have to win it. You
Sure.
have,
Right.
you have
And
to,
move on and on.
and then go from there. But like, you know, I think the trend or the, you know, thing that's consistent across all of this is listen, like listen to people and ask a lot of questions and sort of figure it out and then navigate your way. And what really opened up in that process was realizing, and we had to get into it for this to fully germinate, realizing that no one else does this. Like the green space with which we can grow this is enormous. And so um, by 22, we had sort of the light bulb went on and we knew we were, uncovering something. And so we started to press ahead and expand, which is kind of what's happened since then. And there was a point at which all of those health systems called us and said, "Hey, can we go back to do all of that?"
Mhm.
And after a little bit of thought, we said, "No, sorry,
Right.
not going to do that."
Right.
And not that we won't do it forever, but
Well,
like for
sure.
right now, this is just too important. It's too big. What we're doing is working, so we're going to just stay the course.
Yeah.
And we've just about gotten to the point where we're now starting to kind of expand. But like that notion of focus and prove it and then build from there is extremely important. And we probably wouldn't be around today had we not followed that then.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're a company that, while I'm sure it brought many challenges as it did for everybody else and hurt many industries, it sounds like COVID actually kind of helped you, or at least gave you this in with the military and helped perpetuate that a little bit, right? Which is also kind of interesting.
It is. I mean, it's there are other companies that they're not going to be too braggadocious about
Sure,
this.
right, exactly.
But,
Not the thing you want
health
to sort of
happens to
seem
be
like
one
you're
of those.
taking advantage of, but yeah,
That's right.
you're filling a need, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the the health system has historically been a lagger in technology adoption. Even today, if you looked at any other industry and then you look at health, the state of the systems that are used to run it are probably used to say 10 years behind. Maybe it's a little less than 10 years now. I don't know. But in the government, there is such a thing as the military health system. That's definitely another 10 years behind.
Mhm.
And so the opportunity to innovate and help and make a real impact is pretty substantial. And like there is a notion, these people are the mission. Like one thing that we don't lead with, but certainly comment on when asked, um, in technology, back in the day at Facebook, probably if we're sitting in the OpenAI offices right now, they're going to talk about how they're a mission-driven company. And to a degree, they're right. They are. They're changing some element of the world. But when you're actually helping people to do a job that protects the country, that's not some exaggerated phrase. And so there is a little bit of feeling like we're doing something that really helps people.
Great. Well, two kind of sort of bigger questions on kind of the business end of things. Certainly, we're not a business podcast, but I know a lot of our listeners hopefully are in the business world and alums that might be listening, et cetera. Number one is just kind of that entrepreneurial spirit that you had, and you along the last number of minutes talking about outpatient and stuff. You've mentioned certain traits and keeping your ears open and finding your niche and things like that. But what might be simple advice that you would give to a person who has an idea, who wants to go their own in the world?
Yeah, I would say so. Um, a couple answers. So one is that, if you're thinking about doing something, you probably already have an itch and you probably already have a little bit of an inclination. And that is also to say that this kind of stuff is not for everybody. I have plenty of friends who are love to talk about it. They love to ask questions. They love to know what it's like and, previous experiences, but they would never do this kind of thing. And that's probably the right decision for them. So it's not for everybody, is first thing. Second is that you got to lean in and be okay with maybe knowing less than 50% of what you need to know in order to go, because you can't sit around forever. You got to go test out theories and go test out stuff. And that means you got to roll with it a little bit. Um, and be okay with what happens and learn from it. You know, leaving the ego and the hubris, no matter how well you've done, and especially when you're going in a new area. That was me. Like I'm not health and I'm not military. So like, if I was working at another, social network, that I probably could have a little more strong opinion. But here you got to really listen and learn. That's served me well. But I think, in any situation, you have to kind of understand the framework, and then build around it. But one of the things I said to your class, I didn't get to touch on all of this stuff. It was too tight. But one thing I did say, and I think this is true of anyone that's got entrepreneurial interests, is that, someday you may come across an idea or a thing, whether it's a philanthropy or a religious mission or a company, whatever it is, and you just feel like you have to do it. It's not a choice, you have to do it. That's the thing. That's the trigger that says I have to do this. And to those people in that situation, I would say I hope you do it. But you have to treat it like an adventure. You can't be too serious and you can't be too soft. It's playing the middle and allowing yourself to kind of roll with it, that I think is important to succeeding in this environment, because it is a roller coaster always. Um, I, People ask me what it's like. I'll say, well, every third day is great, and just don't talk about the other two.
Right.
You
Ignore
get to
those.
the third day.
Focus on
I
the third
mean,
day.
yeah, right.
Yeah, so the one other sort of big topic, and I know I shouldn't probably even open the can of worms in terms of, we could be here for hours and hours and years talking about, but maybe I'll focus it specifically on your company, is the topic of AI and where you see that going. And like I said, we could talk about all the different permutations of that forever, but how is that maybe even directly impacting your company and what you're doing there at Outpatient, and how it's going to impact us going forward?
Anybody that's involved in a software company, if they're not involved in some form, they're missing a lot of opportunities. Even just if they're not going to create their own, let me give you an example today. So our company is being sponsored by the DoD to move into a very secure environment. It's quite a compliment for them to sponsor us to move us into this environment. But in order to facilitate the process, we've got to provide them with a complete system architecture of everything. And I'm not the technical guy, not in this environment. My co-founder, Brian, is this CTO. And he was telling me that he was using ChatGPT to basically lay out several slides that are needed to put together. And, he loaded our code base into ChatGPT and it spit out the architecture that we needed to do this, right? Well, that saves us weeks of time in putting this stuff together. And even though we built it ourselves, it's been several years and we don't know everything that, like that,
Right.
you know. And so that kind of efficiency is kind of efficiency that we want to apply to the health system, right? If we're using it ourselves
For
to
sure.
simplify our process. So that's one part of it. On the other side, we are building out tools within our system that essentially will programmatically use AI to reach out to people and say, "Hey, you're due for something," and it's not a
Mm-hmm.
human; it's a programmatic bot that's doing it. That's called agentic AI, an AI agent, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you get a text and a phone call and an email from Bob. And Bob is telling Robert, you have to do this. Reply here and we'll get you set up. And if you don't reply, then AI agent Bob is going to just ping you to death until you do. And when you do reply, you're going to reply to that. And it's going to schedule you for what you need to do. And so it's taking what we're doing today and adding another layer of efficiency to it that reduces what effectively is the manual labor within an environment that desperately needs to reduce their manual labor, right? Um, burden in the healthcare world is a significant thing.
Mhm.
Anybody that's in an administrative role or a support role, not just the doctors, but the people that are, supporting all of that are dying because they have 10 things to do and time to do two. And if you can figure out tools that eliminate that, you're making their world substantially better. And so that's the kind of stuff that I see every day that AI can do. And you can take that same scenario and apply an analogy to every other industry and do the same thing. It's
Exactly.
massive.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing it in the education field as well too. And yeah, obviously the possibilities are unlimited in that way. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to kind of spin back a little bit to the personal side. You've mentioned them along the way. You have a couple daughters, is that right? And your wife. Tell us a little. Three daughters, sorry. And
Dollars.
tell us a little bit about them. What are they up to? And what's the personal side of Pete these days?
We stayed here in the area. We live pretty close by. And three daughters. One lives in New York, the oldest one. Went to NYU and stayed there. Lives in Brooklyn, kind of enjoying her best life right now as a
Mhm.
journalist and photographer. And she's the one that got to interview Zuck
Ah,
that
yeah.
day. And then a middle one was an athlete in college, swam. Was a swimmer and just graduated recently. She's she wants to be a doctor in neuropsychology. So she's working in a neuroscience lab where they evaluate pediatric kids with behavioral things. And the youngest is just finished her freshman year, now beginning or soon to begin sophomore year in Dallas at SMU.
Go ahead.
And so, like three different stories, three different, things, but they're great.
Good. Good.
Um,
Good. Good.
Catherine is she's the better half. And we met in St. Louis. She had moved out there from here, well, not here, LA. But anyway, and we met there and um and they all kind of have their things and I do my thing.
Very
Sometimes
good.
it crosses over, sometimes it doesn't. It's okay.
Sure. I noticed on your LinkedIn or maybe one other place that I saw information, you describe yourself as a sports junkie. What's your you're still into sports and still following those avidly?
Oh
Who's
yeah.
your favorite teams or what's your favorite sports these days?
I mean, I'm a baseball freak still. So, I unfortunately the Cardinals suck right now
Yeah,
and,
you're still a
I'm
Cardinals fan after all these
still a
years, right?
Cardinals fan. As far as baseball is concerned, I don't really root for any other team. But I have adopted the Warriors as a basketball team.
Gotcha.
And I guess I'm kind of I love football and I follow, but I don't have a team. Like I'm not a 49ers fan here. There's no, like I can't like the Rams, you
Right.
know. Um, but I'm still a fan. And I'm still, pretty athletic. I still do a lot of, bike and run and all that stuff. And
Good.
so, I like being outside.
Good. Well, what's your how much is your connection still with Chaminade and how did it come about that that Dr. Guidry asked you to be the graduation speaker this year?
Well, I met him because there is a sister school that, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's Bishop something or whatever in San Francisco. And I guess it's a Marianist brother kind of
Gotcha.
thing. And so he occasionally comes out to visit there. And that's how I first met him. He was in the area. Um, and um, and I like him a lot, by the way. He seems like a good guy, and it's good for the school. One of the things I've noticed today versus when I was there, it was heavy religious, the
Certainly.
brothers and the father and the priests were still running it, and you had to wear, certain attire. That seems to have relaxed a little bit, which, and I'm sure everybody's got an opinion. I appreciate that. Um, I like the sort of golden rule approach. I still claim Catholicism. I'm still, I wouldn't say I go to church every Sunday, but I'm still a Catholic. But just the overbearing sometimes to me surprised a little bit. So I like that. Anyway, and he came out a few times. I was out there a few times. So that's kind of how that started. And then I do stay in touch with a lot of my classmates. Mostly, there's a few others that are adjacent to me in class year that I stay in touch with, and not all of them live in St. Louis anymore.
Right. Well,
There's
great.
so yeah,
Great. Well, to wrap things up, I always ask everyone, all my guests, the same question is reflecting on our school's motto, Estovir, to be a man. And I always like to ask them what that means to them. What does that phrase mean to them, and how maybe it has impacted their life so far. So I'd love your take on what is the meaning of Estovir to Peter Yewell.
you got it. Uh, I would answer that by saying I like the golden rule. I like the thought around the golden rule. Just being, treat others the way you want to be treated, be kind, be considerate, be mature and enjoy the way and help other people along the way. And so, you know, I know that it means be a man, but what does that mean? And those are the things that I think of when I think of that. And it applies to so much, almost everything you do, in every realm. Even a lot of the things we were talking about today, the undertone is a lot of the same. And so that's my, answer to that. I would also share, I'm in several text threads with other guys that are from there. Um, the classmates and the others. And it's pretty common whenever somebody's chatting about whatever, it might be a sports thing, might be a who knows what, and it's crass or sarcastic or maybe even sophomoric. But somebody ends the conversation with esto. And I kind of like that. I mean, I think that's that's cool.
That's a nice touch, and glad that it's stayed with you guys even all these years, and is a reminder to you. We certainly hope that's true for all of our alums. So Peter, thank you so much for the time this evening and taking us through your life story and some business lessons along the way, and also thanks again for coming back and being our graduation speaker this past year. And thank you to our listeners as well for rejoining us here for the Hilltop, and look forward to many more great episodes to come in the 25-26 school year.
Thank you very much.